Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Yod Bet. We're discussing criteria based on which the Bet Din will intercalate the year. Intercalate means to insert something in between two other things. In this case, we're talking about inserting a new month between the regular Adar and Nisan. So what are the criteria? What are not the criteria? Tenorabanan en me'aberin et hashana bishne re'avon. If there's a famine that year, we do not add an extra month because we want people to be able to eat from the new grain as soon as possible. And that is only done at the Omer on the second day of Pesach. If we add another month during a year of famine, then no one will be able to eat from the new grain until a month later. But everybody's hungry. It's a famine. And therefore, even if there's other factors that would prompt us to add a month, if there's a famine, we don't add a month. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, V'ish ba mibal shel isha v'yabe le'ish, ha'elohim lechem bikurim asrim, lechem seorim v'gomer. We have a braita that backs this up. It's a story about Elisha. Someone came from a place called Shalisha, and he brought to Elisha lechem, grain of the first that first grew and first ripened, 20 from loaves of barley, and Elisha said, give it to the people so that they can eat. So let's analyze this pasuk. There's no place in Israel where grain ripens earlier than in Baal Shalisha. So if it only ripened now in Baal Shalisha, certainly it didn't ripen earlier anywhere else. And only one type of grain, only one type of produce was ripened. As we see in the rest of the pasuk, it only mentions one thing. It doesn't mention any of the other 7 grains that Israel is blessed with. Shema tomar chitim. Now maybe you'll say that he brought wheat, and wheat generally ripens after barley. Talmud omar seorim, but the pasuk says seorim, so surely it was only barley that was ripened. Shema tomar lifnei ha'omer, and if you think that this story happened before they brought korban ha'omer, that can't be. Talmud omar ten la'am v'yochelu. Since Elisha said, give it to the people so that they can eat, they would not be able to eat before the Omer, but only after the Omer. So we can learn from here that this was a year in which it would have been appropriate to add a month just because of the equinox or other factors. However, why did Elisha not add an extra month? Because it was a year of famine and everybody was running to the granary because they were hungry and they needed food, and so they did not add an extra month. That is the source for the law that we just said. We do not add an extra month during a year of famine. Tenorabanan en me'abedin et hashana lifnei Rosh Hashanah v'im ebera ena me'oberet. When the Bet Din gets together to decide whether to add a month or not, we don't do that before Rosh Hashanah. And if they did meet before Rosh Hashanah, even b'di'avad, the year is not intercalated. They have to get together after. It's too early back then before to decide. However, if there is pressure, meaning Roman pressure, the Romans did not want the Jews to, among other things, follow their ancestral calendar. And so they prohibited the judges to get together and decide when the calendar is going to be. And therefore, if we are pressured by the Romans as persecution, then the Bet Din can decide right after Rosh Hashanah. They don't have to decide later on in Shevat or close to Adar. They can decide right after Rosh Hashanah, perhaps when the Romans wouldn't be suspecting. So they could do it without the Romans knowing and get the word out. But even if you meet right after Rosh Hashanah, the only month that you can add is Adar. There's a good reason for that. In Torah, there's no names of the months. It's just called B'chodesh Harishon, B'chodesh Hasheni. So if you would add a different month, I'll say an 8th month or an extra 9th month, well then the months after would all be thrown off and you wouldn't know when those holidays would be, when should Tu B'Shvat be, and so on. And so we only add the 12th month. That's that way the Adar is the 12th month anyway, and then there's going to be a 13th month or a second Adar. So we only add Adar, even if we decide way before that we're going to have to, a couple of months before that we're going to have to eventually add a month. We now have a story that seems to contradict the law that we just brought. There's going to be a story about the sages who got together in Av. That's what it's going to say. And they decided to intercalate the calendar then. So we ask, Vashalchu le Rava. The sages in Israel sent a message to Rava in Bavel. The message is that they decided to add a month to the calendar. But they had to write it as a secret message because the Romans at that time forbade the Jews to follow their own calendar and did not let the court meet. And so they had to meet in hiding and at different times. So that's why we're going to see what the hidden message is. It says, Zug ba merakat utfaso nesher. The message is that a pair of sages came from Rakat, that's a name for Tiberia and Eretz Israel, and the eagle caught them. The eagle is a hidden reference to the Romans, maybe not so hidden. The Romans, when they went out to battle, they held an eagle as a standard. It was very, very important to them. So that represents the Romans, so they caught these two sages. And in their hands was something that is made in luz. What's made in luz? Techelet. Here's the snail that we get the techelet dye from. But it probably isn't actually literally be talking about techelet, but rather luz is a hidden reference to Lod, the city in the south, where at some point the sages did meet and decided to intercalate the calendar. Even though these two sages were arrested, by the merit of the merciful one and by their merit, they were able to go free in peace, but they never reached Bavel. So you never got the message that the year is intercalated. So that's why we want to tell you that it was. So here's a continuation of the message. And the offspring of Nachshon, meaning from the line of Yehuda, that's the Nasi, they wanted to establish a pillar. A pillar is a hidden reference to a month. However, the Edomites, that's the Romans, they did not let him do that. They stopped them. However, the members of the assembly gathered, that's the sages, the Betin that gathered, and in fact, they decided to add a month. And when did they do that? They did it in the month in which Aaron died. Now, Aaron died in Av. So here's the question. The Braita that we just cited said that the sages can only get together after Rosh Hashanah to decide to add a month. If they decide before Rosh Hashanah, then it's invalid. But here we have a story where they say, we got together in Av and decided to add a month. So how is that valid? And the answer is simple. They calculated in Av that they will need to, but they did not reveal it. So they didn't make it official until after Rosh Hashanah. But it was convenient for them in Av. They were able to get together and just make an unofficial calculation that after Rosh Hashanah they will need to add a month. Where do we see that the word for pillar is a reference to a month? The pasuk said that King Shlomo had 12 officers who were in charge over Israel, and they provided for the king each month. In other words, there were 12, and each one was assigned a month. You have to provide for all the king's needs for month one, and you for month two, and so on. But then there's another pasuk that says there was one officer in the land. So that's one more. So there's 12 and then there's one more. Who's that one more? What does he do? Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman chad amar echad memune al kulam v'chad amar keneged chodesh ha'ibor. There's a machlokes between Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman. One said that there's one, the 13th one, is in charge of all the other 12. So according to that, we don't learn anything special. But according to the other opinion, there's the 13th is in charge of the extra month. On those years when we had an extra month, that officer will be in charge. So here's where we see that the word nitzavim, officers, is in fact a reference to months. Tenor Rabbanan, en me'abenin et hashana lo mishana lechaverta velo shalosh shanim zo achar zo. The Braita teaches that we do not intercalate a year this year just because we see that we will need to next year. You wait till next year to do it. In other words, if this year everything's okay, but we calculate that next year it's going to be after the equinox. It's before the equinox, and we need to add a month to push it after the equinox. So you'll deal with it next year. You don't have to deal with it right now. And the second rule is that we do not intercalate 3 years in a row. You could have 2 years in a row if each of them need it. Maybe they didn't do it for a while, but not 3 years in a row. Nowadays, we follow a fixed calendar of 7 out of every 19 years. And the ones that we add are the 3rd, the 6th, the 8th, 11, 14, 17, and 19. But back then, they decided year by year, depending on the facts on the ground of what ripens and the equinox and so on, as we saw before. Amar Rabbi Shimon, Maaseh Rabbi Akiva, shaya chabush bebet hasurim ve'iber shalosh shanim zo achar zo. Now we see a story that seems to contradict the law in this baraita, because Rabbi Shimon reports that when Rabbi Akiva was in jailed by the Romans, probably during the Bar Kokhba revolt, he intercalated 3 years, one after the other. That sounds like it's 3 years in a row. And so how could he do that? You just said it's not allowed. So no, you misunderstood. He didn't say that you should intercalate 3 years in a row, just that since he was in jail and who knows if and when he would come out, he told them the next 3 years that will be intercalated. It's not going to be 3 years in a row. He said next year, and then in 2 years after that, and then 3 years after that, whatever he said, he told them the next ones based on his calculation because he was such an expert. And then the Bet Din sat during those years at the right time and they intercalated. So Rabbi Akiva did not actually intercalate 3 years in a row. He just told them for the far future when they should intercalate. Tenor Rabbanan, en me'abedin hashana, lo b'shebi'it, v'lo b'mosei shebi'it, en matay regilin na'abed, erev shebi'it. According to Tanna Kama in this baraita, we do not add an extra month during the Shavuot year. Shavuot year is hard enough. People cannot eat only what grows by itself, and then they can't hoard it, and there's very little food. So we're not going to extend the Shavuot year by another month. Also, the month after, the year after Shavuot, there's very little produce. They can start planting after the Shavuot is over, but then by the time it grows, they still have to rely on storage to eat that year also. So we don't want to push off the Korban HaOmer, because anything that grows that year, we want to shorten it and be able to eat it. So when do we generally make a 13th month? Only we do it on Erev Shavuot, in addition to the other 7 out of 19 years that are standard. But we try to make sure that the 6th year we make longer. That's good, because that way more stuff will grow and we'll be able to store more of it for the Shavuot year and for the year that comes after. However, the house of Rabban Gamliel, they used to intercalate the year on the year after Shavuot. Now, why they do that? Isn't there a lack of food? In fact, Tanna Kama and Rabban Gamliel followed the controversy in the following baraita, that where Tanna Kama fits with Tanna Kama before, and says we do not import vegetables from outside the land of Israel into the land of Israel. Because we do not import vegetables, we are reliant only on what grows in Israel, and nothing grew, or only a little grew during the Shavuot year, and now we have to wait till they grow in the year afterwards, so therefore we don't want to delay it. So the year after also is not going to be a 13-month year. However, Rabbatenu itiru, Rabban Gamliel will follow Rabbotenu, and he says you can import vegetables from outside, and therefore it's okay to add another month if needed in the year after the Shavuot, because if there's a lack of food, we'll just import it from Chutz La'aretz. What's fundamentally the difference between their two opinions? The question is whether we are concerned of clods of earth. There is a law, the Rabbanan law, that the earth, the dirt from Chutz La'aretz is tameh. And if you bring that dirt into Eretz Yisrael, it's not good, it's going to be tameh. So usually when you ship vegetables, you just ship the vegetables. You just ship the carrots by themselves, the tomatoes. You don't ship them with clods of earth. But sometimes some clods of earth can get stuck to it. So Tanna Kama says, no, we worry that clods of earth that are tameh are going to come with the vegetables, and we don't want that, and therefore they prohibit importing any vegetables. Whereas Rabban Gamliel said, no, we'll clean it off before. We don't have to worry that maybe clods of earth will come in, and therefore he says that we are permitted to import vegetables from Chutz La'aretz into the land of Israel. Next baraita tenor banan en me'abedin et hashana mipnei hatum'ah. We do not add an extra month to the year because most of the congregation is tameh, and this would help them regarding Korban Pesach. You see, people are tameh. Let's say, for example, they couldn't find a parah adumah just yet, but there's one coming, and they have to prepare it and all. And so you might think to delay Pesach by 1 month by adding a second Adar, and then people can become tahor. And so Tanakama says, no, we don't do that. Rabbi Yehuda says that is a good reason. That's totally fine. We're going to see the reasons why in a minute. And then we have a story. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. The story is by Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it's okay to add a month. This story is going to seem to contradict Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which we'll solve in a minute. Maaseh b'Chizkiah melech Yehuda she'ibed et hashana mipnei hatum'ah u'bikesh rachamim al asmo. There was a story regarding Chizkiah, the king of Judea, that he added a month because people were tameh, and he wanted them to have a chance to become tahor for Korban Pesach. However, after he did that, he prayed for himself, and he said, I'm sorry I did that. The Pasuk says that most of the nation, most of Ephraim and Menashe and Yisachar and Zebulun, they were not tahor, and they would come down for Korban Pesach. And they ate the Korban Pesach not according to what the Torah says. And so Chizkiah prayed for them and says, I hope that Hashem will pardon them. Okay, so now is the question that we're going to ask in a minute. If Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay to add a month because people are tahor, well then Chizkiah did the right thing. So what's the problem? Why did he have to pray on behalf of himself? It looks like this story would follow the Tanakama, yet it's Rabbi Yehuda that says it. Okay, the Gemara in a minute is actually going to change these opinions in order to solve this problem. But first we finish the Baraita. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, if the Bet Din adds a month because people are tameh and you want them to become tahor, that's totally valid. So in that case, why did Chizkiah pray for himself if he didn't? What did he do wrong? The answer is you're only allowed to add a second Adar, but Chizkiah didn't do that. He realized much later, after Nisan already started, and then he announced, oh wait, this is going to be the first Nisan, and then there's going to be another Nisan, and then we're going to celebrate Pesach in the second Nisan. That's what he prayed for forgiveness, because you can add a month for Tumah, but not like that. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon Mipnei she'esi et Yisrael la'asot Pesach Sheni. He had another interpretation for why Chizkiah had to pray that he did something wrong. And the problem is, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, is that he pushed Israel to do Pesach Sheni. In fact, he didn't add a month. People were tameh, and there is, we're going to see, a law that if most people are tameh, then you can bring korban in bet tum'ah. This is actually a very important law, which very theoretically could apply to today. You say, well, everybody's tameh. We don't have a parah adumah. But technically, even if everybody's tameh, you still could bring a korban pesach. And so Chizkiah didn't do anything wrong if he had just brought Korban Pesach, that would have been fine. And the problem is that he pushed everyone to do Pesach Sheni. He said, oh, everybody is Tameh here, or most people are Tameh, so you can't do Pesach Rishon. Instead, you have to come back, have an extra month. They did have an extra month, but not by adding a month to the year. He just said, everybody come back and do Pesach Sheni. But that wasn't right. Pesach Sheni is only for individuals. If most people are tahor and a few individuals are tameh, they have to do Pesach Sheni. But if most people are tameh, then everyone can do Korban Pesach Rishon. Okay, that's the end of the Braita. Now let's analyze. Amar Mor, Rabbi Yehuda Omer me'aberin alma it le Rabbi Yehuda tumah dechuya besibur. Rabbi Yehuda says that we do add a month because people are tameh. We can learn from here that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that impurity is overridden when the public is impure. We're going to see there's a machloket whether tumah dechuya besibur or tumah hutra besibur. The opinion that says hutra besibur, and in fact we're going to prove in the next source that Rabbi Yehuda himself says hutra, says that if the majority of people are impure, then it's totally fine for them to do Korban Pesach. You don't have to make any attempt to try to add a month or do anything else. Hutra, totally mutar. Dechuya says it's overridden, meaning, yes, we'll override if we have to, but we'd rather not. And so that would apply here to the Yehuda, even though technically, if most people are tameh and they would bring Korban Pesach, regular Korban Pesach, it would be okay. But if you can, it's only that we override it. But if you can't add a month, then you should, and then everybody will be tahor. So that's what the Yehuda says, me'aberin, that you can add. According to the one who says hutra, it's totally permitted, and then that way you would not be allowed to add a month. You rather just make Korban Pesach with everyone tameh. Now we ask, V'hatanya, sis ben sheyeshno al mischo ben she'eno al mischo meraseh. Tebele Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda omer odo al mischo meraseh, en odo al mischo eno meraseh. We have a baraita that says the front plate of that the Kohen Gadol wears, it doesn't matter whether he's actually wearing it or happens not to not be wearing it. He doesn't wear it 24/7. It will atone. In other words, if there's something goes wrong in the Bet HaMikdash, the seats of the Kohen Gadol will atone for that sin. That's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Only while the Kohen Gadol is actually wearing it and something goes wrong in the Bet HaMikdash, that's when it will atone. But if it's at that time not on his forehead, he's not wearing it, then it will not atone for whatever mistake that they made in the Bet HaMikdash. Amar lo Rabbi Shimon, Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim yochiach she'eno al mischo me'um meraseh. Rabbi Shimon says, I can prove my point from the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, because he does not wear the seats all day. When he goes into the Kodesh Kodashim, he wears only white garments, not gold garments, and the seats is part of his regular gold garments, not his white linen garments. And yet, everything is accepted on Yom Kippur. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda, hanach Yom Kippur shetumah hutra besibor. Rabbi Yehuda says, don't bring an example of Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is an example of a public korban, where if everybody is tameh, then it's permitted, hutra. So we see here that Rabbi Yehuda follows the opinion that tumah, hutra besibor, is totally permitted. And therefore, this contradicts what we just said before, that Tumah is only nidche besibor, dechuya besibor. So which is it? What does Rabbi Yehuda say? And now we add another question, v'lita'amich. Tikshe lach hi gufa. According to you, if you think that Rabbi Yehuda thinks Tumah hutra besibor, then we can find the contradiction in the baraita that we quoted above. Rabbi Yehuda omer me'aberin. Rabbi Yehuda says that we add a month. Adding a month is because people are tameh. That suggests that it's dechuya. It's a good idea to try to add a month so that people will be tahor. Ve'amar Rabbi Yehuda ma'aseh b'chizkiah melech Yehuda she'ibed et hashana mipnei hatum'ah u'bikesh rachamim al asmo. But then we have the story of Chizkiah that did just that, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, that should be fine, right? Because hutcha. Yet he prayed for himself, meaning he shouldn't have done it. So the story suggests that Rabbi Yehuda, he's the one that tells the story, that Rabbi Yehuda thinks that hutra besibor la chasure mechasera v'achi katani en me'abedin et hashana mipnei hatumah v'meberuah me'oberet. Rabbi Yehuda omer ena me'oberet ve'amar Rabbi Yehuda. So we have missing words. We're actually going to switch the opinions and read it as follows. We do not add a month to the year because of tum'ah. And if you did b'di'avad, that's okay. Tanna Kama actually says b'di'avad, it's okay. Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't work. It's totally invalid. The month is not added because hutra besibor. If the people are tameh, just do it. Go for it. And then Rabbi Yehuda brings a proof from Chizkiah, who did add a month, but then he prayed because he did the wrong thing. Good. Once you're switching the opinion of Tanna Kama, then when we read Rabbi Shimon, and he says, if you added a month, it's okay, that's the same as Tanna Kama, who also say, if you added a month, that's okay. So what's the difference between them? The Rava says the difference is whether you should do so lechatechila. It's hutra. I understand hutra, but lechatechila do it, or is it only b'di'avad? Tanya namehachi en me'abenin tashana mipnei tu'atuma lechatechila. We see in the baraita that according to Tanna Kama, that would be Tanna Kama in the previous baraita also, we do not add a month to the year lechatechila. B'diavad, it's okay, but not lechatechila. Rabbi Shimon Omer me'aberin. Rabbi Shimon says, go for it, right? If they did it because of that, then it's good. So this language is more lechatechila sounding than the language of Tanakama, who says, we don't do it lechatechila. If you did it b'diavad, that's okay. So there is still a difference between them. We do so lechatechila. Ela mipnei bikesh rachamim ala small shen ma'aberin ela adar hu iber nisan benisan. And then we continue with Rabbi Shimon's question. If so, that you can add a month because of tum'ah, then why did he pray that he did the wrong thing? And the answer is that according to Rabbi Shimon, he's supposed to add adar. Instead, he added nisan. If he added adar, that would be totally good. Lechatechila. Amar mor, shen me'aberin ela adar. והוא עיבר ניסן בניסן. ולת לחזקיה חודש הזה לכם, זה ניסן ואין אחר ניסן. Now we just quoted this opinion that says we can only add a month of Adar, and Chizkiah went and added a second Nisan. But doesn't Chizkiah know the derashah that says this month is for you, the first month, chodesh hazeh, and that's Nisan, meaning that only one month can be called Nisan, not 2 months, chodesh hazeh, singular. And has to be first. You can't have two firsts. Shemuel, de'amar Shemuel, en me'aberin et hashana b'yom sheloshim shel Adar. V'ho'il v'ra'ui l'kobo Nisan. And the answer is yes. Chizkiah did know that. What he made a mistake about was something more subtle. He made a mistake regarding Shemuel's ruling that we do not add a second Adar on the 30th of Adar. If you want to add a second Adar, you have to do so beforehand. It could be in the middle of Adar, that's okay. You tell everybody, listen, this was Adar Rishon. But you can't do it on the 30th day, because the 30th day of Adar could technically be Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So since it could already be Nisan, that's it, that's too late. You can't go back and call it Adar now. Well, that's what Shemuel said. And Chizkiah thought that we don't make that logic. We don't say, since it could be Rosh Chodesh, in fact, it was not designated as Rosh Chodesh. Since it was not designated, it was not consecrated, so it's still part of Adar. Since it's still part of Adar, Chizkiah thought that he can still go ahead and add that second month. But really, Shemuel is right, and you can't. There's a braita that supports Shemuel that we don't add a month to the year on the 30th day of Adar, because it could theoretically be Rosh Chodesh Nisan if they declared it so. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Mishum Rabbi Shimon, Mipnei she'asiyet Yisrael la'asot Pesach Sheni, hechi dameh. Now the last opinion in the braita of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says that, what did Chizkiah do wrong? He made everyone follow Pesach Sheni. Instead of, since they were tameh, they should have just done Pesach Rishon. So what exactly happened? How did he make that mistake? אמר רב אשי, כגון שהיו ישראל מכסה טמאים, מכסה טהורים, ונשים אשמות הטהורים ועודפות עליהם. The men of Israel were half tameh and half tahor. But then the women there were more women who were tahor, and if you include the women also, then most people are tahor. If you don't include the women, then most people are tameh. So, meikara sabar nashim berishon bechoba tavu miyotan temein umiyotan mitchu lepesach sheni. At first, Chizkiah thought that women they're obligated to bring korban pesach in that first month, the same as men, and therefore they should be included in the count. If you include them in the count, then a minority of people altogether, men and women, are tameh, and if a majority is tahor, then the tahor people do it, and the minority who's tameh get pushed off to Pesach Sheni. That's why he pushed the tameh people off to Pesach Sheni. ובסוף סבר נשים בראשון רשות ודאבו להו טמאים רובה ורובה למדחו לפסח שני. But then he changed his mind, and he realized that women do not have to bring Korban Pesach. That's not the halacha, that they don't have to bring Korban Pesach, therefore they should not be included. If you don't include the women, the men were half-half, or even more, men were tameh. Since most people were tameh, they should not delay till Pesach Sheni. They should have brought it betum'ah, since most people were tameh. Good. Gufa. Now we go back and explain Shemuel more. Amar Shemuel, Nisan. Beruha Mai. Shemuel says that we don't add a month if it's already the 30th day of Adar, because it could be declared that 30th day could become Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so it's already too late. Now the question is, B'di Avad, if the Bet Din got together and they said, on the 30th of Adar, this is first Adar, we're adding another month. Is it valid? B'diavad, Amar Ula en mekadishin et hachodesh. Ula says, if the Bet Din got together on the 30th of Adar and they said, we're adding a month, then they should not sanctify the new month, because if they sanctify the new month, it will look like it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Instead, they should not do it, but it is, in fact, there will be a second Adar. So that's the answer. If they did extend the year with an extra month on the 30th, it does work. They should just have to make sure not to declare it Rosh Chodesh, because then that will be really confusing. And now we ask precisely that. B'diavad, what if they did? Kiddishu Mai. Maybe that Bet Din, maybe a different Bet Din that didn't know that the first one did it, and they said, today is Rosh Chodesh. What do? There's two opinions. Amar Rava Batela Aibor. If they said today is Rosh Chodesh, that means it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And the intercalation that they made prior is null and void, because once you declare Rosh Chodesh, that means Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rav Nachman Amar Me'obar Umekudash. Rav Nachman says the month is added and it is also Rosh Chodesh. It's Rosh Chodesh Adar. So Rav Nachman thinks that the Ibur remains valid, even though they sanctify the new moon after. So that'll be the sanctification of the moon of second Adar. Amar le Rav Nachman, Mikedi mipuraya lepischa telatin yomen havu, mipuraya darshinan belchot Pesach. Rava has a challenge against Rav Nachman from the fact that from Purim until Pesach is 30 days. And starting on Purim, the rabbis will teach the laws of Pesach, as we learn in Ebraita de Tanya, Shalin belchot Pesach kodem la Pesach sheloshim yom. We discuss the laws of Pesach before Pesach 30 days, which is from Purim. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer shtei Shabbatot. Rashbag says no, only 2 weeks. Fine. Rabba says the reason why I think that you have to start Nisan, once you say this is Rosh Chodesh and you do it on the 30th, you have to start Nisan. Why? Because if when Rosh Chodesh Rosh Chodesh is announced and people assume that's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and they've heard the rabbi already teaching about Pesach since Purim. So now, if you tell them, if a messenger comes and tells them, oh, we added another Adar, this is not Pesach coming up in 2 weeks, people will make light of that, of Chametz, because they'll say, no, this messenger must be wrong. They've already been teaching the laws of Chametz since last month, and therefore the first month that comes right after Purim, that must be the real Pesach. They'll observe that Pesach, and then when the next month comes around, they will eat Chametz, because they'll say Pesach already passed. In other words, people indicate their calendar. They don't have like official calendars on their walls. They know their calendar based on the public events that are happening. And so once you start announcing and discussing the laws of Pesach, people are going to assume that Pesach is coming up soon, and therefore you can't change that. Otherwise, it's going to mess everybody up. They're going to keep the first Pesach and not the second Pesach. So therefore, just keep the first Nisan as the real Nisan. אמר למדע ידעי דהשתה מעברתה בחושפנת על ימילתה. אמרי חושפנה הוא דלה סלק lehu Rabbanan ad hashta. But Rav Nachman says, I don't think so. The people know that the intercalation of the month depends on calculation. And they will figure, when they hear the news, oh, I guess they did not have a set conclusion, right? The calculation was not conclusive until now. And they were still debating it. And therefore, even though they learned some halachot, but they'll say, oh, okay, so now the calendar is different, and they won't get so confused. Rav Nachman has more faith in the people to figure it out, and that is the reason behind their machloket. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.